A Brahman bull, massive and muscled, collapsed at the entrance of Guadalupe Mountain Ranger Station, his hide slick with blood not his own. Samuel Whitaker dropped his retirement paperwork, coffee spilling across 40 years of service records. It wasn't just any bull, it was Goliath, the legendary escape artist from Sterling Ranch who supposedly understood human speech. "Sweet Jesus!" Martha Clementine gasped from the doorway, her weathered hand clutching her throat. The emergency radio crackled to life as younger rangers scrambled for tranquilizers, the metallic smell of fear mixing with brewing coffee. The bull's eyes, intelligent and desperate, locked onto Sam's face with unmistakable recognition, though they'd never met. A low, mournful bellow escaped Goliath's throat as he struggled to his feet, turning to stare pointedly at the eastern trail. "He wants us to follow," Martha whispered, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who'd seen miracles in war. What awaited down that trail? And who was bleeding? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Samuel Whitaker had walked the dusty trails of Guadalupe Mountains National Park for nearly 4 decades, memorizing every limestone ridge and desert wash until they became more familiar than the lines on his weathered face. At 60, his tall frame remained imposing despite the slight stoop that had developed in recent years. A ranger's badge and a lifetime of carrying others' burdens will do that to a man. The park had been his salvation after Vietnam, a place where the rhythms of nature drowned out the memories that still occasionally invaded his dreams. It had been home when his actual home on Sycamore Lane sat empty and cold, especially since Elaine passed 3 years ago. Cancer took her in 97 days flat. Quicker than anyone expected, not nearly enough time to say all that needed saying. Sam's retirement papers sat half-completed on his desk, 40 years to the day, and in 2 weeks it would all be over. His daughter Catherine hadn't even bothered to call when he'd mentioned it, their relationship as parched as the drought-stricken landscape he patrolled. Guadalupe Mountains were suffering their 3rd year of severe drought. The McKittrick Canyon creeks had dried to occasional puddles, and wildlife was venturing closer to human areas in desperate search of water. The park staff had been reduced to bare-bones operation, budget cuts hitting hardest in the places most Americans never visited. Martha Clementine was a fixture on the edges of park life. At 78, her spine curved like a question mark, but her eyes missed nothing. Vietnam-era combat nurse turned local healer, Martha lived in a small cabin just outside park boundaries, where she tended to injured wildlife with a mixture of modern medicine and folk remedies that Sam had learned not to question. The locals called her eccentric. Rangers called her when official channels weren't enough. And then there was Goliath, the massive Brahman bull whose appearance had shattered the morning's quiet routine. His silver-white coat and pronounced shoulder hump made him unmistakable, but it was the scars crisscrossing his flanks that told his story. Once the prized bull of the Sterling Ranch rodeo string, rumors of his intelligence had become local legend after his escape 3 years earlier. Some said he understood human speech. Others claimed he could sense approaching storms better than any meteorologist. The Sterling family had searched for months before declaring him dead, taken by mountain lions or poachers. Yet here he stood, somehow alive and seemingly desperate for human help. Sam had seen animals do strange things in his career: bears dragging campers from dangerous flash floods, horses returning to burning stables for their companions. But he'd never seen anything like the purposeful desperation in Goliath's eyes, or the way the massive bull paced between the rangers and the eastern trail, clearly wanting them to follow. What Sam couldn't possibly know that morning, as coffee dried on his retirement papers, was that Goliath would lead him not just down a trail, but toward the parts of himself he'd locked away after Elaine's death, and toward a mystery that would challenge everything he thought he understood about the relationship between humans and animals. For the last time, we cannot follow a damn bull into the backcountry based on a hunch. Tyler Johnson's voice carried across the ranger station with the sharp edge of authority that came from youth rather than experience. The 28-year-old assistant park manager adjusted his perfectly creased uniform and glared at Sam. We have protocols for injured wildlife. Protocols that don't include wild goose chases. Sam watched as two younger rangers circled Goliath cautiously, tranquilizer guns at the ready. The bull stood remarkably still now, his massive chest heaving with exhaustion, eyes never leaving Sam's face. The blood on his silver coat had dried to a rusty brown, definitely not his own. That animal needs medical attention and containment, Tyler continued, thumbing through the Park Service manual as if the answer to everything could be found in its pages. I've already called animal control from El Paso. Martha Clementine pushed past Tyler with surprising strength for her age, her gray hair escaping from its bun as she approached the bull without hesitation. "You put those dart guns down right now," she commanded. "This isn't just any bull." To everyone's amazement, Goliath lowered his massive head as Martha approached, allowing her gnarled hand to rest between his eyes. The old woman whispered something to the animal that Sam couldn't hear. "Ma'am, please step away from the wild animal," Tyler said, his voice rising with anxiety. Martha turned, fixing Tyler with a stare that had made battlefield surgeons quake in '68. "This is Goliath. He belonged to the Sterling place before they turned it into that resort monstrosity. He's no more wild than you are, young man, and a sight more intelligent." Sam approached slowly, noting how the bull's muscles tensed, then relaxed, as he recognized no threat. Up close, the animal was even more impressive, easily 2,000 pounds of muscle crowned with sharp, curved horns that could gore a man without effort. Yet there was something in those dark eyes that gave Sam pause. "Martha, you know this bull?" Sam asked, keeping his voice low and calm. "Known him since he was a calf. The Sterlings bred him for rodeo, meanest bull they ever owned, they claimed. Truth is, he was just smart enough to know when he was being mistreated." Martha stroked the bull's broad forehead. "He escaped during that big thunderstorm 3 years back, same night as the flash flood that took out the lower pastures." Sam remembered that night well. 3 hikers lost, roads washed out, the park closed for a week afterward. "And you think he's trying to, what, tell us something?" Martha's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Samuel Whitaker, in all your years out here, haven't you learned that sometimes the wild speaks if you're humble enough to listen?" Tyler snorted. "This isn't a Disney movie, Mrs. Clementine. It's a dangerous animal that needs containment." Sam stared at the bull, who had begun to pace again, moving several steps toward the eastern trail before turning back to look at them. The pattern was unmistakable. In 40 years of ranger work, Sam had developed an instinct about the natural world that no manual could teach. "Something's wrong out there," Sam said finally. "I'm going to take a look." Tyler stepped forward. "Chief Whitaker, with all due respect—" "I didn't ask for your respect, Tyler. I'm still Chief Ranger for another 2 weeks." Sam grabbed his field pack from beside his desk. "I'll take radio channel 3. If I'm not back by sundown, you can write me up for all I care." Martha stepped away from Goliath. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not," both Sam and Tyler said simultaneously. Martha smiled, the kind of smile that said she'd outlived too many men who told her what she couldn't do. "That bull trusts me. And if someone's hurt out there, you might need a nurse." Sam knew there was no arguing with Martha when her mind was set. Besides, she knew this land almost as well as he did. "Fine. But you stay behind me, and if I say run, you run. Clear?" "Crystal," Martha replied, already heading to her ancient pickup to grab her medical bag. 20 minutes later, Sam, Martha, and a reluctant young ranger named Diego Rodriguez set out on the eastern trail, following the massive bull who seemed to understand exactly what they were doing. Tyler's protests faded behind them as Goliath led them past the maintained trails and toward the more rugged backcountry that butted up against what had once been Sterling Ranch land. The summer heat pressed down like a physical weight. August in West Texas took no prisoners, and by midday the temperature had climbed past 100 degrees. Sam felt the familiar tightness in his chest that had been appearing more frequently lately, but he ignored it, just as he ignored the moisture gathering at his hairline and the slight tremor in his left hand. "He's heading toward Devil's Canyon," Diego observed, adjusting his pack. The youngest of the permanent rangers, Diego had grown up in nearby Van Horn and knew the area's folklore as well as its geography. "Sterling property backs up to the canyon on the north side," Martha added, keeping pace with surprising stamina. "There's an old mining access road that hasn't been used in decades." Goliath maintained a steady pace ahead of them, occasionally stopping to ensure they were following. The bull navigated the rough terrain with surprising agility for his size, choosing paths that the humans could manage. "This is crazy," Diego muttered, though without real conviction. "Following a bull into the backcountry in August. Sometimes crazy finds you," Sam replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "And sometimes it's the sanest option available." As they crested a ridge, Sam felt a momentary vertigo that had nothing to do with the height. Images of Elaine flashed unbidden, her final days, the way her hand had felt like paper in his, the questions in her eyes that he'd been too cowardly to answer. He steadied himself against a boulder, hoping the others hadn't noticed. "You all right, Chief?" Diego asked. "Just catching my breath," Sam lied, forcing his feet to move again. The landscape grew more rugged as they approached Devil's Canyon, a steep-walled ravine that flooded violently during the rare desert rains. Now it was bone-dry, the creek bed cracked like ancient pottery. Goliath led them down a game trail that switchbacked into the canyon, his hooves sending small cascades of rock skittering down the incline. "We should have seen something by now," Diego said, voicing what Sam had been thinking. "Blood trail? Disturbed ground? Something?" Martha stopped suddenly, head tilted as if listening to a distant sound. "Water," she said. "I hear water." In the drought-parched park, flowing water in August was as rare as snow. Sam strained his ears and caught it too, the faint, musical sound of running water where none should be. Goliath had stopped at a bend in the canyon, pawing the ground impatiently. When the humans caught up, they discovered why. A narrow crevice in the canyon wall, barely visible unless you stood directly in front of it, with a small seep of water trickling from its depths. "That wasn't on any of our maps," Diego whispered, already pulling out his canteen to collect a water sample. "Sterling Ranch had water rights dating back to the 1880s, Martha explained. "They guarded their springs jealously." Sam approached the crevice, shining his flashlight into the darkness. The beam caught something unexpected. Boot prints in the mud, small ones, alongside the unmistakable tracks of a large bull. "Someone's been here," Sam said, straightening up. "Recently." Goliath pushed past him, squeezing his massive bulk through the crevice with determined effort, disappearing into the darkness beyond. The sound of his hooves echoed briefly, then silence. Sam looked at Martha, whose eyes had taken on a strange, knowing light. "You're not surprised," he said. Martha adjusted her ancient straw hat. "Goliath didn't just escape that night, Sam. He took something with him, or rather, someone." Before Sam could respond, a sound echoed from within the crevice. Not the bull's movement, but something else. Something that raised the hair on the back of Sam's neck. It was the sound of a child crying. The passage beyond the crevice opened into a small hidden canyon, a geological pocket that erosion had carved over millennia. What struck Sam first was the greenery. Impossible, vibrant green in the midst of drought-stricken brown. A natural spring bubbled from the canyon wall, creating a small pool before disappearing underground again. The second thing he noticed was the makeshift shelter, tarps and salvaged wood arranged against the canyon wall. And beneath that shelter, pressed against Goliath's massive flank, was a small figure with tangled brown hair and eyes wide with fear. A little girl, no more than 10 years old, thin and wild-looking, clutched a crude drawing pad to her chest. Around her neck hung half of a heart-shaped pendant on a leather cord. Her clothes were dirty, but had once been good quality, and despite the fear in her eyes, there was a fierceness there too. The look of someone who had decided to survive at any cost. Goliath stood protectively beside her, his massive body positioned between the girl and the newcomers. The message was clear. Help her, but approach with care. "Sweet Jesus," Martha whispered, her hand finding Sam's arm for support. "It's the Bennett girl, Lily Bennett." Diego's voice was barely above a whisper. "But that's impossible. The search was called off months ago." Sam held up his hand for silence, his eyes never leaving the girl. Lily Bennett. The name stirred memories of helicopter searches, volunteer teams combing the backcountry, the gradually fading hope in her mother's eyes as weeks turned to months with no sign of the child who had vanished from the Sterling Ranch Resort's riding stables last spring. "No sudden moves," Sam cautioned, lowering himself slowly to a crouch. The girl shrank further against Goliath's side, her small hand clutching at his coarse silver fur. The bull shifted his weight, positioning himself more firmly between them. "Hello, Lily," Sam said, keeping his voice gentle. "My name is Sam. I'm a park ranger. We've been looking for you for a long time." The girl's expression didn't change. No recognition, no relief, just wary observation. Martha stepped forward with the careful movements of someone who understood fear. "She won't answer you, Sam. Not with words, anyway." The old woman knelt despite her arthritic knees and placed her medical bag on the ground. "The Bennetts brought her to my place once, maybe 2 years back. Lily doesn't speak, never has, far as anyone knows." Sam watched as Martha opened her bag and pulled out a granola bar, unwrapping it slowly before placing it on a flat rock midway between them and the girl. "You remember me, don't you, child? Martha from the cabin with all the wind chimes?" Something flickered in Lily's eyes, not quite recognition, but a lessening of fear. She made no move toward the food, however. "Selective mutism," Martha continued quietly. "That's what the doctors called it. Her mama said she hadn't spoken a word since she was 3. Communicates just fine with drawings, though." As if on cue, Lily clutched her drawing pad tighter against her chest. Diego had moved to examine the makeshift shelter. "Chief, you need to see this," he said, his voice strained. Sam approached cautiously, always keeping himself visible to both Lily and Goliath. The shelter was surprisingly well constructed, a framework of branches supporting weatherproof tarps, the floor covered with dried grass. Inside, he found a collection of salvaged items: plastic water bottles, granola bar wrappers carefully flattened and saved, a backpack that must have belonged to a hiker, a thermal emergency blanket. But what caught his attention were the drawings pinned to the inside walls, dozens of them, created with scavenged pencils and crayons on paper torn from the pad. Most depicted Goliath, rendered with surprising skill for a child her age. Others showed a man with angry red scribbles obscuring his face, and several showed what appeared to be the same man hurting a woman with long hair. "Her stepfather," Martha said quietly beside him. "Jason Mills. Married her mother about a year after the girl's father died in that oil rig accident. Folks said he was good to them at first." Sam felt a familiar tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with his heart condition. "Any evidence of—" He couldn't finish the question. Martha shook her head. "Nothing I can see from here. But that doesn't mean there wasn't harm done. Sam stepped back from the shelter, processing what they'd found. A missing child, presumed dead, surviving for months in a hidden canyon with the help of an escaped bull. It sounded impossible, yet the evidence stood before them. Lily alive, thin but not starving, and Goliath, her unlikely guardian. "The blood on Goliath," Sam said suddenly. "If it's not his, and not Lily's." Diego's eyes widened. "There's someone else out here." Martha had managed to coax Lily a few steps from Goliath's side with a bottle of water. The girl drank thirstily but maintained her grip on the bull's fur with her free hand. "Lily," Sam said gently, "is someone hurt? Is that why Goliath came to find us?" The girl stared at him for a long moment, then slowly opened her drawing pad. With trembling fingers, she flipped to a page and turned it toward them. The drawing showed Goliath standing protectively over a stick figure lying on the ground. Above them loomed another figure, holding what appeared to be a rifle. Red crayon marked the fallen figure's chest. "Who is that, sweetheart?" Martha asked, pointing to the fallen person. Lily turned to a fresh page and drew rapidly. A simple house, a tree with wind chimes, and a stick figure with gray hair. She pointed at Martha, then back at the drawing of the injured person. "Someone at my place?" Martha's voice cracked with sudden understanding. "Edward? Is my Edward hurt?" Lily nodded vigorously. Edward Clementine had been the caretaker of Martha's property since her husband died, living in the small guest house and helping the aging nurse maintain her home. In his 70s himself, Edward was the only person Martha truly trusted. "That's why Goliath came to the station," Sam said, pieces falling into place. "Not just for Lily, for Edward too." Diego was already on the radio calling for medical backup and additional rangers. "No response," he said, frowning at the device. "These canyon walls must be blocking the signal." Sam made a quick decision. "Diego, you stay here with Lily. Martha and I will follow Goliath back to her place to check on Edward. Once we get clear of the canyon, we'll radio for help." "Begging your pardon, Chief, but protocol says we should—" "Protocol doesn't account for a child who's been missing for months or an injured man who might be bleeding out as we speak," Sam cut him off. "You've got the GPS coordinates. Mark this location and wait for backup." Diego looked like he wanted to argue, but nodded instead. "Yes, sir." Martha was already gathering her medical supplies. "Lily needs to come with us," she said firmly. "She won't stay with strangers, and we can't leave her alone." As if to confirm this, Lily had moved to Goliath's side, one hand clutching his fur while the other held her drawing pad. The massive bull lowered his head gently toward her, a gesture so tender it seemed impossible from such a powerful creature. "Can she ride him?" Sam asked, eyeing the bull's substantial height. "Been doing it for months, I'd wager," Martha replied. "How else would they cover ground together?" Sure enough, when Martha approached with gentle words, Lily allowed herself to be lifted onto Goliath's broad back, settling just behind his pronounced shoulder hump, with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times before. "We're burning daylight," Sam said, checking his watch. "It's nearly 3. We've got maybe 4 hours until sunset." As they prepared to leave, Sam felt the tightness in his chest return, sharper this time. He took a deep breath and pushed the discomfort away. There would be time for his own problems later. Goliath led them out of the hidden canyon by a different route, a narrow game trail that wound up the northern face rather than back through the crevice. The climb was steep, and Sam found himself stopping more frequently than he would have liked, each rest disguised as a chance to check their surroundings. Martha said nothing about his pauses, but her eyes missed little. "Those nitroglycerin tablets still in the first aid kit at your station?" she asked casually during one such stop. Sam gave her a sharp look. "I don't need medication." "Didn't say you did," Martha replied evenly. "Just making conversation about emergency supplies." "Been meaning to update my own kit." The trail eventually connected with an old mining road, little more than 2 ruts carved into the landscape decades earlier. Goliath moved with greater urgency now, his powerful muscles bunching and releasing as he navigated the rough terrain with Lily balanced securely on his back. Once they cleared the high canyon walls, Diego's voice crackled over the radio. "Chief, you read me?" "Go ahead, Diego," Sam responded, grateful for the technology that hadn't existed when he first started ranging these mountains. "Backup's on the way. 2 rangers and paramedics. ETA about an hour to the hidden canyon. I've got coordinates locked. Any update on your end?" "Negative. Heading to Martha's property now. We'll report when we arrive." "Chief," Diego's voice lowered, "Tyler's on the warpath. Says you violated about 15 protocols. Director's been notified." Sam exchanged glances with Martha. "Noted. We'll deal with that later." Whitaker out. Martha's property came into view as they crested a ridge, a small homestead nestled against the park boundary, marked by colorful wind chimes hanging from a massive cottonwood tree. In the fading afternoon light, it should have looked peaceful. Instead, Sam immediately sensed something was wrong. The front door of the main house stood open. Edward's truck was parked at an odd angle near the barn, driver's door ajar. Goliath stopped at the ridgeline, nostrils flaring. A low rumble emerged from his massive chest. "Something's not right," Martha whispered, her face suddenly pale. "Edward never leaves doors open. Keeps the dust out, he says." Sam unholstered his service weapon. "Stay here with Lily. If you hear anything that sounds like trouble, you head back toward the park entrance." "Don't wait for me." Martha nodded, helping Lily down from Goliath's back. The girl immediately wrapped her arms around the bull's thick neck, burying her face in his fur. Sam approached the homestead cautiously, using the scattered junipers and outbuildings for cover. As he neared Edward's truck, he spotted the blood, dark stains on the driver's seat and more droplets leading toward the barn. The sudden crack of a twig behind him was his only warning. Pain exploded across the back of his skull, and Sam felt himself falling. As consciousness slipped away, he heard Martha's distant scream and, more terrifyingly, the thunderous bellow of an enraged Brahmin bull. His last thought before darkness took him was of Elaine, and how he'd failed her too. Sam regained consciousness to the taste of copper and dust. His head throbbed with each heartbeat, the pain radiating from the back of his skull in waves that threatened to pull him back into darkness. He forced his eyes open to find himself lying on the dirt floor of Martha's barn, late afternoon sunlight slanting through gaps in the weathered boards. "About time you rejoined the living," came Martha's voice, tight with strain. He turned his head carefully to find her sitting against a support post, hands bound in front of her with baling wire. Blood had dried in a thin line from her temple to her jaw, but her eyes were clear and focused. "Edward?" Sam managed to ask, his mouth desert dry. Martha's expression crumpled slightly before she regained control. "Shot. Not fatal, I don't think, but he needs a hospital. They've got him in the root cellar." Sam tested his own restraints, similar baling wire cutting into his wrists. "They?" "Jason Mills and 2 others. Poachers using my property as a staging ground." Her voice dropped lower. "They've been running an operation through the old mine tunnels, exotic animals, endangered species." Edward found out. Sam's ranger training kicked in, pushing through the pain as he cataloged their situation. The barn door was closed but not visibly locked. No sign of his service weapon. Judging by the light, maybe an hour until sunset. His radio was gone from his belt. "Lily?" he asked, dreading the answer. "They don't know about her," Martha whispered. "She and Goliath disappeared when the shooting started. That bull has more sense than most men I've known." Relief flooded through Sam, followed immediately by concern for the girl. Alone in the wilderness again. But no, not alone. With Goliath. Somehow, that thought brought comfort. "We need to," Sam began, but fell silent as the barn door swung open. Jason Mills stepped inside, silhouetted against the dying sunlight. In his early 40s, he had the lean, ropey build of someone who worked with his hands. His face might have been handsome once, before bitterness and cruelty had carved permanent lines around his mouth. A hunting rifle rested casually against his shoulder. "Chief Ranger Whitaker," he said, his voice carrying a forced pleasantness that raised the hairs on Sam's neck. 40 years protecting these mountains, and you never noticed what was happening right under your nose. That's almost impressive." Sam struggled to sit up, ignoring the stab of pain in his head. "We've got Rangers coming, Mills. Whatever you're into, it's over." Mills laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "Your radio calls didn't go through. These old buildings, tin roofs play hell with signals." He gestured vaguely toward the ceiling. "And your backup is busy with a reported wildfire near Dog Canyon. Funny how those start just when you need a distraction." Martha made a small, distressed sound. "You set a fire." "In this drought?" "Controlled burn," Mills corrected. "Small, but enough to keep the Park Service occupied while we clear out our operation." He crouched in front of Sam, close enough that Sam could smell tobacco and whiskey on his breath. "Here's how this plays out, Ranger. We're moving our merchandise tonight. By morning, we'll be gone, and you two will have a tragic accident. Maybe the fire spread further than expected." "Merchandise," Sam repeated flatly. "You mean endangered animals?" Mills shrugged. "Rich men will pay a lot for certain hunting experiences. Exotic cats, specialty breeds. If they can't hunt it legally, the price goes up." "And Lily?" Sam asked, watching Mills's face carefully. "Was she merchandise too?" Something dangerous flashed in Mill's eyes. "My stepdaughter is dead. Mountain lions, probably. Tragic accident during a father-daughter camping trip." "Except she isn't dead," Sam pressed, even as Martha shot him a warning look. "And those drawings in her hideout tell an interesting story about her stepfather." Mills moved with unexpected speed, the rifle butt connecting with Sam's ribs with a crack that sent white-hot pain through his chest. Sam doubled over, fighting for breath. "You don't know what you're talking about, old man," Mills hissed. "Lily's gone, and you never found a body, did you?" Martha spoke up, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. "That child deserved better than you, better than what her mother allowed to happen." Mills turned toward her, his face twisting. Her mother was weak. Couldn't discipline the little freak. Kid wouldn't talk, wouldn't even look me in the eye. Needed to learn respect. "Is that what you call it?" Sam wheezed, trying to draw Mills' attention away from Martha. "Beating respect into a child?" Before Mills could respond, a voice called from outside. "Jason, we got movement on the ridge." Mills straightened, instantly alert. "Stay put. My associates will be keeping an eye on you." He strode out of the barn, securing the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, Martha scooted closer to Sam. "Your ribs?" "Cracked, at least one," Sam admitted through gritted teeth. "Martha, if Lily's on that ridge—" "She's not," Martha interrupted with surprising certainty. "That child's smarter than any of us. So is that bull." Sam tried to make sense of that, but was distracted by a new pain, a familiar tightening across his chest that had nothing to do with his injured ribs. Not now, he thought desperately. Not when people are counting on me. "Sam?" Martha's voice seemed to come from far away. "Samuel Whitaker, you look at me right now." He forced himself to focus on her face, weathered as the mountains themselves. "You're having heart symptoms," she stated rather than asked. "How long?" 6 months, give or take, he admitted. "Nothing serious." Martha's expression would have withered stronger men. "Nothing serious," he says, "just like a man to ignore his own mortality until it comes knocking with a battering ram. Despite everything, Sam found himself smiling. Not how I expected to spend my last 2 weeks on the job. Not how I expected to spend my Tuesday afternoon either, Martha retorted. Then her voice softened. Your Elaine would be mighty disappointed in how you've been caring for yourself. The mention of his wife's name sent a familiar ache through him that had nothing to do with his physical condition. Elaine made her peace with my stubbornness a long time ago. Martha worked at the wire, binding her wrists, wincing as it cut into her papery skin. Did I ever tell you I knew her? Before you two got together, back when she was Elaine Jeffers working at the hospital in El Paso? Sam stared at her. No, you never mentioned that. Most things worth knowing don't get mentioned unless the time is right, Martha replied cryptically. She had the touch, you know. Best nurse I ever trained, could calm the most agitated patients with just her presence. A commotion outside interrupted them, raised voices, the sound of a vehicle engine revving. Through a gap in the barn boards, Sam could see men loading crates into a panel truck. From the sounds, the crates contained living cargo. We need to get out of here, Sam muttered, twisting his wrists painfully against the wire. Martha had gone quiet, her head tilted as if listening for something beyond human hearing. They're coming, she whispered. Who's coming? The backup rangers? Martha shook her head, a strange smile lifting the corners of her mouth. No, something better. The light outside had shifted to the deep gold of approaching sunset when they heard it, a thunderous bellow that seemed to shake the very foundations of the old barn. It was followed by shouts of alarm and the sound of running feet. What the hell was that? Came a voice Sam didn't recognize. It's that damn bull, Mills shouted. The one that mauled Jose last spring. Shoot it! A rifle cracked, followed by another. Then came a sound that raised the hair on Sam's arms, a child's scream, high and terrified. Lily, Sam whispered, renewing his efforts against the restraints with desperate energy. The next moments unfolded in cacophony. More gunshots, the crash of splintering wood, men shouting, and above it all the earth-shaking roar of an enraged Brahman bull. Martha had managed to bloody her wrists but loosen the wire. With a final wrench that made her gasp in pain, she freed her hands. Hold still, she commanded, quickly working on Sam's bindings. The barn door burst open. Mills staggered inside, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead. The bull's gone crazy, he panted, grabbing a coiled rope from a hook. Knocked over the truck, scattered the crates. Animals everywhere. He didn't seem to register that Martha was free until she was already moving, her small frame launching with surprising speed to slam into his midsection. Mills stumbled backward but didn't fall, shoving the old woman roughly aside. You stupid old witch, he snarled, raising his hand to strike her. The blow never landed. With a splintering crash, the barn's side wall gave way as 2,000 pounds of muscle and fury smashed through the weathered boards. Goliath stood in the gap, silhouetted against the setting sun, his massive head lowered and nostrils flared. Perched improbably on his broad back, clutching his fur with white-knuckled determination, was Lily. Mills froze, his face draining of color. Impossible, he whispered. The tableau held for one breathless moment. Mills, standing with hand raised, Martha sprawled on the dirt floor, Sam still partially bound and framed in the shattered wall, a Brahman bull carrying a child who should have been dead months ago. Then, many things happened at once. Mills lunged for his dropped rifle. Martha kicked it beyond his reach. Sam finally tore free from his loosened restraints. And Goliath charged. For all his massive bulk, the bull moved with the precision of a surgeon. His charge stopped short of trampling Mills, but one sweeping motion of his horned head sent the man crashing into the barn wall. Lily slid from Goliath's back with practiced ease and ran to Martha, burying her face in the old woman's shoulder. Outside, engines roared to life as Mills' associates apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor. Sam staggered to his feet, fighting through the pain in his chest and ribs to reach the barn door. Through it, he could see the panel truck speeding away in a cloud of dust, leaving Mills behind. "Sam!" Martha's urgent voice pulled his attention back inside. "He's not breathing, right?" For a moment Sam thought she meant Mills, but Martha was crouched beside Goliath. The massive bull had collapsed to his knees, sides heaving with labored breaths. Now that the immediate danger had passed, Sam could see what they'd missed before. A dark stain spreading across the bull's silver-white shoulder, just below the distinctive hump. "He's been shot," Sam realized, moving quickly to the animal's side. "Must have happened during the commotion." Goliath's dark eye rolled toward Sam, showing more white than before. The bull made a low, rumbling sound, not of aggression but of pain. "My bag," Martha ordered, cradling Lily with one arm while pointing to her fallen medical kit with the other. "Get the blue case." As Sam retrieved it, he was struck by the tableau before him: an elderly nurse, a mute child, and a wounded bull, bound together by circumstances so unlikely they bordered on miraculous. Yet, in this moment, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. Behind them, Mills groaned and started to stir. Without hesitation, Sam secured the man's wrists with the same baling wire that had bound him earlier. "That won't hold him long," Martha warned, already working to clean Goliath's wound. "Long enough," Sam replied grimly. He picked up Mills' fallen rifle and tucked it safely out of reach, then pulled out his backup radio, the one hidden in his boot that the poachers hadn't found. "This is Chief Ranger Whitaker. I need immediate assistance at the Clementine property on the eastern boundary. Officer down, civilians in danger, suspect in custody, multiple gunshot victims, including—" He paused, looking at Goliath. What was he? Livestock? Wildlife? "Including a witness who helped us crack an animal trafficking operation," he finished. As Sam relayed the coordinates, he felt the tightness in his chest intensify. The edges of his vision darkened, and he had to lean against the barn wall to stay upright. "Not now," he thought desperately. "Not when they're all depending on me." But his body had other ideas. The radio slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers as Sam slid down the wall. The last thing he heard was Martha calling his name, her voice fading into a rushing sound like distant water. The last thing he saw was Lily's small face appearing above him, her silent mouth forming words he couldn't hear. And beside her, impossibly, the massive head of Goliath, the bull's dark eye regarding him with what could only be described as concern. Then darkness claimed him, and Sam Whitaker, who had spent 40 years rescuing others, finally surrendered to the knowledge that now he was the one who needed saving. The helicopter's rhythmic thump, thump, thump penetrated Sam's consciousness before he opened his eyes. Voices filtered through the fog in his mind, professional, urgent, medical. "BP's stabilizing at 110/70. EKG shows ST elevation in leads 2, 3, and AVF. Classic inferior MI. Push another round of heparin. How far to El Paso?" 18 minutes at current speed." Sam forced his eyes open, immediately assaulted by the bright interior of a medical helicopter. A paramedic leaned over him, adjusting something on his IV line. "Chief Whitaker, can you hear me? You're having a heart attack. We're flying you to Providence Medical in El Paso." The words registered distantly, less important than his sudden panic. "Martha? Lily?" His voice came out as a rasp. "They're safe," the paramedic assured him. "Another ranger is with them. Try not to speak. Save your strength." But Sam needed to know. "Goliath? The bull?" The paramedic exchanged a glance with his colleague. "Large animal vet is with him. That's all I know. Sir, please, you need to remain calm." Calm was impossible. Fragments of memory flashed through Sam's mind. Goliath charging through the barn wall, Mill's face as he recognized his stepdaughter, the spreading blood stain on the bull's silver coat, and beneath these images, a deep current of failure. He'd collapsed when they needed him most. "My fault," he muttered. "Should have noticed earlier." "The heart attack wasn't your fault," the paramedic misunderstood, adjusting something on the monitor. "Sometimes there's no warning." But Sam wasn't talking about his heart. He was thinking of Lily, hiding for months while search teams eventually gave up. Thinking of an animal trafficking operation running under his nose for who knew how long. Thinking of Edward, shot and hidden in a root cellar. The pain in his chest intensified and darkness crowded the edges of his vision again. This time, he didn't fight it. Sam next awoke to the steady beep of a hospital monitor and the antiseptic smell that had become all too familiar during Elaine's final days. For a moment, time collapsed, and he expected to see her in the bed instead of himself, thin and pale, but still smiling that smile that had first captured his heart decades ago. "You're a stubborn old coot, Samuel Whitaker." The voice wasn't Elaine's. Sam turned his head to see Martha sitting in the visitor's chair, her lined face showing every minute of her 78 years. Her wrists were bandaged, and a butterfly closure held together the cut on her temple. "Look who's talking," he managed, his voice rough. Martha leaned forward, pouring water from a plastic pitcher into a cup and helping him drink. "Doctors say you're lucky. Moderate heart attack. No major damage to the heart muscle if you behave yourself from now on." Sam took a moment to assess his condition. His chest ached dully, but the crushing pressure was gone. Various tubes and wires connected him to machines. A clock on the wall showed 10:17, though whether morning or night he couldn't tell. "How long?" he asked. "Almost 2 days," Martha replied. "They kept you sedated through the worst of it." 2 days. The realization hit him hard. "Lily? Edward?" Martha's expression softened. "Edward's 2 floors down. Lost some blood, but the bullet went clean through his shoulder. He'll mend." She hesitated, and Sam felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "And Lily?" "She's safe. Child Protective Services has her, but—" Martha twisted her gnarled hands in her lap. "There's complications, Sam. Her mother's demanding custody." "The same mother who let her new husband abuse her daughter?" Sam tried to sit up, triggering alarms on one of the monitors. A nurse appeared in the doorway, frowning disapprovingly. "Mr. Whitaker, you need to remain calm," the nurse admonished, checking his vitals. "I am perfectly calm," Sam lied. "I just need to know what's happening with the Bennett case." The nurse looked like she wanted to argue, but instead adjusted his medication. 5 more minutes, she told Martha firmly. "He needs rest." When they were alone again, Martha continued in a lower voice. "Laura Bennett claims she never knew about the abuse. Says she thought Lily ran away after an argument about school. She's been in rehab for the past 3 months. Pills, mostly. Now she's clean and wants her daughter back." Sam closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 40 years of similar stories. Children caught in the machinery of broken homes and imperfect systems. "And Mills?" "In custody, along with one of his associates. The other got away." Martha's voice hardened. "They found evidence of at least a dozen endangered species being moved through that operation. Ocelots, Mexican wolves, even a pair of jaguar cubs. The FBI's involved now." "Good." Sam opened his eyes again. "And Goliath?" Something shifted in Martha's expression, a guardedness he hadn't seen before. "That's complicated." "Martha." Sam fixed her with the look that had made new rangers snap to attention for decades. "Tell me." She sighed, showing her age. "The bullet wound wasn't fatal. Dr. Reyes, she's the large animal vet from Las Cruces. She removed it and stitched him up. But Goliath is technically classified as livestock, and with the Sterling Ranch claiming ownership, They want him back, Sam realized, anger flaring. After all this time, after what he did, they want to put him back in the rodeo circuit. Worse, Martha said quietly. James Sterling Jr. is talking about having him put down. Claims he's dangerous, attacked their employees. They're using Mill's injuries as evidence. Sam felt the monitors registering his rising heart rate but didn't care. That's garbage and you know it. Goliath was protecting Lily. He's the reason she survived out there. I know that, Martha said patiently. And you know that. But Sterling has lawyers and connections, and Goliath is, legally speaking, just a bull. The nurse reappeared, her expression brooking no argument. That's enough excitement for now. Mrs. Clementine, you can come back during regular visiting hours. Martha stood, wincing slightly at her stiff joints. I'll be back tomorrow, Sam. And... She hesitated. There's someone who wants to see you. Someone who's been waiting a long time. Before Sam could ask what she meant, Martha was gone, and the nurse was adjusting his medication. Drowsiness swept over him like a wave, pulling him back into darkness. The next time Sam woke, sunlight streamed through the window blinds, casting striped shadows across his hospital room. He felt clearer, the fog of medication lifting enough to take better stock of his surroundings. A knock at the door drew his attention. Tyler Johnson stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes rather than his ranger uniform. Chief? Tyler nodded stiffly. May I come in? Sam gestured to the chair Martha had occupied earlier. Free country. Tyler sat, placing his ranger hat on his knee with precise movements. For a moment he seemed to struggle for words. Unusual for a man who typically had regulations and protocols ready to quote at any moment. The director asked me to get your statement about what happened at the Clementine property, he finally said, pulling out a small notebook. Did he now? Sam shifted, trying to find a comfortable position. Seems like that could wait until I'm out of cardiac care. Tyler flushed slightly. Yes, sir, but there are some time-sensitive elements the Sterling family is pushing for Goliath to be destroyed, Sam finished flatly. Martha told me. Yes, sir. And since the animal was instrumental in uncovering the trafficking operation, the director thought your statement might help counter their claims. Sam studied the younger ranger. Behind the stiff exterior he could see genuine concern, and something else. Respect, maybe, or a reevaluation. What would you have done, Tyler? Sam asked suddenly. If a bull had shown up at the station that morning clearly trying to communicate something, would you have followed it? Tyler looked startled by the question. Protocol doesn't really cover. Forget protocol. What would you have done? The younger man was silent for a long moment. I would have called animal control, he admitted finally. And we would have lost Lily, and Edward would probably be dead, and those animals would be in private hunting reserves by now. Sam nodded, satisfied with the honest answer. 40 years in those mountains taught me one thing, son. Nature speaks its own language. Sometimes following the rules means not hearing what it's trying to tell you. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. About that, the director wanted me to tell you, your retirement paperwork has been misplaced. Computer error. Might take another 6 months to process. Sam narrowed his eyes. Is that so? Yes, sir. Very unfortunate. Bureaucracy. Tyler's face remained serious, but there was a glint in his eye that hadn't been there before. In the meantime, you'll remain on medical leave with full pay, of course. Before Sam could respond, there was another knock. A tall woman with auburn hair streaked with gray stood in the doorway, her posture and bearing immediately familiar, even though Sam hadn't seen her in nearly 3 years. Dad? Catherine Whitaker said, her voice catching slightly. The nurse said you were awake. Tyler stood immediately, nodding to them both. "I'll come back for that statement later, Chief." He hesitated, then added, "It's good to see you doing better, sir." As the door closed behind the young ranger, silence filled the room. Catherine remained by the door, as though uncertain of her welcome. "Katie," Sam finally said, using the nickname she'd outgrown decades ago, "you didn't have to come all this way." "Martha called me," she replied, taking a tentative step forward. "Said my stubborn father had finally managed to break his own heart." Her attempt at humor fell flat, the worry in her eyes betraying her. "Seems that way," Sam acknowledged. "How's Seattle?" "Rainy." Catherine moved closer, taking the seat Tyler had vacated. "Cold, empty, since David left." This was news to Sam. "Your husband left. When?" "8 months ago." She smoothed non-existent wrinkles from her slacks. "I should have called. I meant to. It's just hard to talk to your old man," Sam finished for her. "I understand." "No, you don't," Catherine said, a flash of the fire she'd inherited from her mother showing through. "It's hard to talk to someone who shut down after Mom died, who buried himself in work instead of grief, who stopped calling because it was easier than dealing with the emptiness." The words hit Sam like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. "I'm sorry," he said simply, the words feeling wholly inadequate. Catherine looked down at her hands, so like Elaine's, capable and strong. "I heard what happened, about the little girl and the bull. Sounds like something out of a fairy tale." "Reality's stranger than any story," Sam said. "That bull saved Lily's life, maybe mine too, and now the Sterlings want to destroy him because it's convenient." His daughter studied him for a moment. The old Sam Whitaker would have cited regulations about wild animals and private property rights, then turned in his report. "Maybe I'm not the old Sam Whitaker anymore." A ghost of a smile touched Catherine's lips. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." She hesitated, then reached out to take his hand. "I've got 3 weeks of vacation time saved up. Thought maybe I could stay a while. Help you recover." The simple gesture, his daughter's hand in his, broke something loose in Sam's chest that had nothing to do with his heart attack. For the first time since Elaine's death, he felt the wall he'd built around himself begin to crumble. "I'd like that," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. Catherine squeezed his hand. "Martha's quite a character. She's convinced half the hospital staff that this bull is some kind of miracle worker, even has the pediatric psychologist interested in how he connected with Lily." "Martha tends to have that effect on people," Sam said dryly. "She also mentioned something about needing a lawyer for Goliath. Called me up and asked if I still did that legal mumbo-jumbo for a living." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Fortunately, environmental law is still my specialty, and I have some thoughts on how the Endangered Species Act might apply here, given the bull's role in uncovering an animal trafficking operation." Sam felt a surge of pride mixed with a dawning hope. "You'd do that? Take the case?" Catherine's smile reminded him so much of Elaine that it ached. Defending a heroic bull against corporate interest? "Dad, lawyers dream of cases this interesting." Before they could discuss it further, the door opened again, revealing Martha in the company of a doctor in a white coat. "Samuel Whitaker, meet Dr. Reynolds," Martha announced. "He's agreed to sign the medical releases we need for our next move." The doctor, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, nodded at Sam. "Mrs. Clementine has been very persuasive about your case. And after reviewing your charts, I believe a supervised relocation might actually be beneficial to your recovery." Sam looked between them, confused. "Relocation? I'm having a heart attack, not moving houses." "Partial recovery at Martha's place," the doctor clarified, "with daily check-ins from our mobile cardiac unit. Mrs. Clementine is a registered nurse, and the peaceful setting would reduce stress factors during your initial recovery period. Sam narrowed his eyes at Martha, who maintained an expression of perfect innocence. And this has nothing to do with a certain bull currently housed in your barn? Goliath is recovering nicely under Dr. Reyes's care, Martha said primly. The fact that both of our recoveries might benefit from proximity is simply good medical sense. Dr. Reynolds looked slightly uncomfortable. I should mention that this arrangement is unconventional. But given the circumstances and Mrs. Clementine's medical background, I've agreed to authorize it provided you follow the recovery protocol to the letter. Sam looked to Catherine, expecting objection or at least skepticism. Instead, he found support in her eyes. "It makes sense, Dad," she said. "And I'll be there too. Between a nurse, a lawyer, and your own stubbornness, how could anything go wrong?" The question was clearly rhetorical, but Sam couldn't help thinking of everything that could indeed go wrong. Yet against those concerns stood something stronger. The image of Goliath charging through that barn wall, risking everything to protect a child who had no one else. Some debts couldn't be repaid, but they could at least be acknowledged. "All right," he agreed. "When do we start this unconventional arrangement?" "Tomorrow morning," Dr. Reynolds said, "assuming your condition remains stable and you agree to use a wheelchair until cleared for more activity." "A wheelchair?" Sam protested. "I've hiked these mountains for decades. I don't need—" "You'll use it," Catherine interrupted firmly, "or the deal's off. Heart attacks aren't sprained ankles, Dad." Sam recognized the set of his daughter's jaw, the same expression Elaine had worn when her mind was made up. "Fine," he conceded. "But only until I'm cleared by a doctor." "That's the spirit," Martha said, patting his arm. "Compromise, first sign of wisdom in a man your age." As they discussed the logistics of his transfer, Sam's thoughts drifted to Goliath and Lily, a bull and a silent child, both traumatized, both survivors. What was it Martha had said? Sometimes the wild speaks its own language. You just have to be humble enough to listen. Perhaps in the wake of his heart attack, Sam was finally learning to listen, not just to the wilderness he'd protected for 40 years, but to his own heart as well. Martha's property transformed in the week following Sam's release from the hospital. What had once been a quiet homestead became the unlikely center of an unfolding drama that drew attention from across 3 counties. The gravel driveway, usually empty save for Martha's ancient pickup and Edward's truck, now regularly hosted vehicles ranging from Park Service SUVs to news vans that Martha chased away with surprising vigor for a woman her age. "Vultures," she muttered, after sending a particularly persistent reporter from the El Paso Times on his way. "Wouldn't know a real story if it bit him on the backside." Sam watched from his reluctant throne, the wheelchair he'd been confined to for the past 7 days, positioned strategically on the front porch where he could observe the comings and goings. His body was healing, but more slowly than his impatience could tolerate. The doctors spoke optimistically about his recovery, but the reality of what had happened settled over him like a physical weight. A heart attack, the very thing that had taken his father at 57. "You're brooding again," Catherine remarked, emerging from the house with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Sam before settling into the rocking chair beside him. "I can practically hear the gears grinding." "Just thinking," Sam defended mildly, accepting the coffee. "About retirement?" Catherine asked. "Or about the fact that Sterling's lawyers are meeting with the judge today?" Both, though Sam didn't admit it aloud. The Sterling Ranch Resort's legal team had moved with impressive speed, filing for an emergency hearing to reclaim their valuable livestock asset. Catherine had countered with an equally swift temporary injunction, arguing that Goliath was a material witness in an ongoing federal investigation. "Any word from your contact at the U.S. Attorney's office?" Sam asked instead. Catherine sipped her coffee, the gesture so reminiscent of Elaine that it made Sam's chest ache in a way unrelated to his recent cardiac event. Angela thinks the trafficking case is solid. Mills is talking, trying to cut a deal. Apparently, there are bigger players involved than we initially thought. Some Texas oil money funding the whole operation. Sam nodded, processing this. The scope of the case had expanded far beyond a missing child and an escaped bull. The FBI had taken over much of the investigation, uncovering connections to illegal wildlife operations in 3 states. "And Lily?" he asked quietly. Catherine's expression softened. "Still not speaking. The psychologist visits daily, but—" She trailed off, her gaze drifting toward the barn where, by unspoken agreement, Goliath had been given the largest stall. The arrangement had raised eyebrows among the medical professionals monitoring Sam's recovery, but none could deny the remarkable progress of both patients. Goliath's bullet wound was healing cleanly, and the bull had become unusually docile, except when anyone other than their immediate circle approached Lily. The child had established a routine of spending hours each day in the barn, sitting near Goliath's stall with her drawing pad. She would emerge only for meals, and when Martha gently insisted she sleep in a proper bed at night. "Laura Bennett's attorney called again," Catherine said after a moment. "They're pushing for supervised visitation." Sam's hands tightened around his mug. "What did you tell them?" "That any visitation would require approval from Lily's doctors and therapists." Catherine tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I also mentioned that as material witnesses in an ongoing federal investigation, both Lily and Goliath are under special protection. Is that true?" Catherine's smile held a hint of mischief. "It is now. I had Angela file the paperwork yesterday." Sam felt a surge of pride in his daughter's legal maneuvering. "You always were smarter than me." "Learn from the best," she replied, but her smile faded as she looked toward the driveway. "Company coming?" A cloud of dust announced the arrival of a vehicle, a Park Service SUV that Sam recognized as Tyler Johnson's. The assistant park manager had been noticeably absent since Sam's heart attack, communicating mainly through official channels and brief, formal calls. Tyler parked and approached the porch with uncharacteristic hesitation, his ranger hat clutched in his hands. "Chief Whitaker, Ms. Whitaker." He nodded to them both. "Mrs. Clementine around?" "Checking on Edward in the guest house," Sam replied. "What brings you by, Tyler? More paperwork?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, sir, I came to apologize." Of all the things Sam had expected, an apology wasn't among them. "For what, exactly?" "For not backing you up that day. For being so caught up in regulations that I couldn't see what was right in front of me." Tyler's words came out in a rush, as though he'd rehearsed them but still feared losing his nerve. "I filed my official report yesterday. Stated clearly that your actions saved lives and uncovered a major criminal operation." Sam studied the younger man, seeing him perhaps for the first time, not as an obstacle or a by-the-book irritant, but as someone genuinely trying to find his way. That couldn't have been easy to write. Tyler's mouth quirked in the ghost of a smile. "About as easy as admitting I was wrong about the bull. Speaking of which—" He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document, handing it to Catherine. "Thought you might want to see this. It's been making the rounds in the regional office." Catherine unfolded the paper, a printout of an online petition titled, "Save Goliath, Hero Bull of Guadalupe Mountains." The signature count stood at over 87,000. "It's gone viral," Tyler explained, a hint of awe in his voice. "After the El Paso station ran that piece about how he protected Lily and led you to the trafficking operation. There's even talk of a documentary." Sam handed the printout back, oddly unsettled by the idea of their story becoming public fodder. "A petition won't sway a judge if Sterling has legal ownership." "Maybe not," Tyler acknowledged. "But public opinion matters to a resort that depends on tourism." And speaking of Sterling, He hesitated, glancing at Catherine. "What is it?" she prompted. "James Sterling, Jr. is on his way here, now, with his lawyer and a livestock transport vehicle." Catherine stood immediately. "The injunction was denied," Tyler finished grimly. "Judge Harmon ruled this morning. As legal owner, Sterling has the right to reclaim his property immediately." Sam felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He gripped the wheels of his chair, pushing himself upright despite Catherine's protests. "Help me to the barn. Now!" Tyler stepped forward without hesitation, supporting Sam as they made their way down the porch steps and across the yard. Catherine hurried ahead to the barn, calling for Martha. Inside, the familiar smells of hay and animals wrapped around Sam like an old coat. The barn had been modified to accommodate its unusual patient. The largest stall expanded further, fresh straw bedding changed daily, a custom water trough installed at Goliath's preferred height. The bull himself lay on his side, his massive chest rising and falling steadily. The bandage on his shoulder was fresh. Martha changed it twice daily with a care that would impress any surgical nurse. Beside him, curled on a clean horse blanket with her drawing pad, Lily dozed in the afternoon warmth. The scene struck Sam with its improbable peace. A wounded bull and a traumatized child, finding in each other what humans had failed to provide: safety, understanding, unconditional acceptance. Martha emerged from a tack room, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's all the commotion?" Catherine quickly explained the situation as Tyler helped Sam to a bale of hay where he could sit. "They can't take him," Martha declared, her voice sharp with anger. "He's still recovering. Moving him could reopen that wound." "Sterling doesn't care about that," Sam said quietly. "He sees a valuable breeding bull, or worse, a rodeo attraction with a famous backstory." "Over my dead body," Martha muttered, her fingers curling into fists. The sound of vehicles approaching silenced them all. Lily stirred, her eyes opening with the hyper-awareness of a child accustomed to danger. She looked questioningly at Martha, who forced a reassuring smile. "It's all right, sweetheart. Just some visitors. Why don't you keep Goliath company while we talk to them?" But Goliath was already rising to his feet, movement awkward but determined. The bull's ears had pricked forward at the sound of the vehicles, his posture shifting from restful to alert. Lily stood too, one small hand resting against his massive shoulder. Tyler stepped outside to intercept the visitors while Catherine quickly reviewed her legal notes. "We can argue that moving him violates animal welfare standards during recovery. It might buy us a few days to file an appeal." Sam barely heard her. He was watching Goliath, who had positioned himself between Lily and the barn door with the same protective stance he'd shown at the hidden canyon. The bull knew. Somehow he understood what was happening. "It won't work," Sam said heavily. "Sterling has the law on his side. Goliath is legally his property." "Property." Martha spat the word like a curse. "That bull has more humanity than most people I've met." Voices approached. Tyler's, strained but professional, and another man's, sharp with authority and impatience. The barn door swung open to reveal James Sterling, Jr., a man in his early 50s with the polished appearance of wealth and the hard eyes of someone who valued profit above all else. Behind him stood a woman in an expensive suit, presumably his lawyer, and two men in Sterling Ranch uniforms. "There he is," Sterling announced, a note of satisfaction in his voice as he spotted Goliath. "Doesn't look too worse for wear, considering." "Mr. Sterling?" Catherine stepped forward, every inch the professional attorney despite her casual clothes. "I'm Catherine Whitaker, representing the interest of this animal in connection with the federal trafficking case. I must inform you that removing him at this stage could constitute interference with a federal investigation." The lawyer stepped forward, unimpressed. "Ms. Whitaker, Judge Harmon was quite clear. The animal is Sterling Ranch property, and the temporary injunction has been denied. We have the paperwork right here." As they argued legal points, Sam watched Lily. The girl had pressed herself against Goliath's side, her small face a mask of fear as she stared at the visitors. When her gaze fell on Sterling, something changed in her expression, a recognition that made Sam's blood run cold. "She knows him," Sam said, the realization cutting through the legal debate. "Lily recognizes Sterling." All eyes turned to the child, who had begun to tremble visibly. Goliath shifted, positioning his bulk more firmly between her and the newcomers. Sterling's expression flickered, too briefly for most to notice, but Sam had spent decades reading people in high-stress situations. It was guilt, quickly masked by annoyance. "This is ridiculous," Sterling said dismissively. "The girl is traumatized, seeing threats everywhere. My men are here for the bull, nothing more." Martha had moved to Lily's side, her arm around the child's shoulders. "It's all right, sweetheart. No one's going to hurt you." But Lily shook her head vehemently, then did something none of them expected. She grabbed her drawing pad and flipped through pages frantically until she found what she was looking for. With determined steps, she approached Catherine and thrust the pad into her hands. The drawing showed 3 stick figures, a large one labeled Dad, with angry red marks for eyes, a smaller one labeled Him, pointing toward the first figure, and a third figure on the ground. In crude child's writing beneath it, "They hurt people." Catherine stared at the drawing, then at Sterling, whose face had hardened into a mask. "Mr. Sterling, did you have knowledge of Jason Mills's activities?" "I'm not answering absurd accusations from a disturbed child," Sterling snapped. "My men are here for the bull. Stand aside." The 2 ranch hands moved forward, carrying heavy-duty leads designed for controlling large cattle. Goliath's muscles bunched visibly, his head lowering in warning. "Stop," Sam said, forcing himself to stand despite the pain it caused. "This isn't just about ownership anymore. If Lily is indicating that Sterling was involved with Mills—" "Pure speculation," Sterling's lawyer cut in smoothly. "The child hasn't spoken a word, and crude drawings would never be admissible as evidence. Now, if you continue to obstruct my client's legal right to reclaim his property, we'll add additional charges to the lawsuit already being prepared." Sam felt helpless rage building in his chest, a dangerous emotion for a man in his condition. The law, which he'd upheld for 40 years, was failing them when it mattered most, failing Lily, failing Goliath. The familiar tightness began to squeeze his chest again. And then, a voice. Small and rusty from disuse, but clear enough to freeze everyone in place. He watched. All eyes turned to Lily, who stood trembling but determined, her finger pointed directly at Sterling. "He watched when my stepdad hurt the animals. He gave him money. He said I was lying." The barn fell so silent that the buzzing of flies seemed deafening. Lily's voice, used for the first time in years, had the power of a thunderclap. "He said no one would believe me because I was broken. But Goliath believed me." Tears streamed down her face now. "He saved me when no one else would." Sterling recovered first. "This is absurd. The girl is obviously coached, and this entire delay is a setup." He turned to his men. "Get the bull now." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The ranch hands moved toward Goliath with their leads. Martha pulled Lily back protectively. Catherine stepped forward, still arguing legal points, and Goliath, 2,000 pounds of muscle and survival instinct, rose to his full height. But the bull didn't charge. He didn't thrash or bellow in rage. Instead, with deliberate care, he walked forward and then, astonishingly, lowered himself to his knees directly in front of Sam. The message was unmistakable to everyone in that barn. Goliath was making a choice. "Well, I'll be damned," Martha whispered. Sterling's face contorted with anger. "Control that animal before he hurts someone." "He's not going to hurt anyone," Sam said quietly, resting his hand on Goliath's broad forehead. "He never was. That's not who he is." For a moment that stretched into eternity, man and bull regarded each other, the ranger at the end of his career and the animal who had defied every expectation. In Goliath's dark eye, Sam saw not the mindless aggression that rodeo announcers had once attributed to him, but a deep, knowing intelligence. "You can take him," Sam finally said to Sterling, his voice level despite the emotion behind it. "That's your legal right. But before you do, you should know that every moment of this is being recorded." Sterling's head snapped up, searching for cameras. "Not by us," Sam clarified. "By them." He nodded toward the barn entrance where Tyler stood with 2 FBI agents and a woman holding a press badge from the El Paso Tribune. "Special Agent Rivera has been particularly interested in the connection between wealthy ranch owners and wildlife trafficking. I imagine she'd be fascinated by what Lily just said." Sterling's face drained of color as Agent Rivera stepped forward, her badge held out. "Mr. Sterling, we'd like to ask you some questions about your relationship with Jason Mills and the shipping containers found on the property adjacent to your resort." "This is harassment," Sterling's lawyer interjected. "My client has no knowledge of any illegal activities." "Then he won't mind answering a few questions," Agent Rivera replied smoothly. "Meanwhile, I'm issuing a protection order for both the minor child and the animal as potential witnesses. They'll remain in secure custody until our investigation is complete." As the agents led a protesting Sterling outside, the reporter tried to approach Lily, only to be blocked by Martha's surprisingly intimidating presence. "That child has been through enough without becoming tomorrow's headline," the old woman declared. "You want a story?" Write about how a system designed to protect children failed her at every turn until a bull with more sense than most humans stepped in. The reporter, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, nodded respectfully. "May I at least get a photo of the bull from a distance?" Martha looked to Sam, who shrugged slightly. The story would get out regardless. "One photo," Martha conceded. "And his name is Goliath. Make sure you spell it right." As the commotion gradually moved outside, Lily approached Sam and Goliath, her small hand coming to rest atop Sam's where it still touched the bull's forehead. "You talked," Sam said gently. "That was very brave." Lily nodded solemnly. Goliath said it was time. Instead of questioning this statement, Sam simply accepted it. After everything he'd witnessed, the idea that a child and a bull shared some special understanding seemed no more extraordinary than anything else. "What happens now?" Lily asked, her voice still rough from disuse. It was the question Sam had been asking himself since waking up in the hospital. What happens now? To his career, to his health, to the unexpected connections formed through crisis? "I don't know exactly," he admitted, "but I promise you this. You and Goliath won't be separated, not if I have anything to say about it." Martha returned, closing the barn door firmly against the outside world. "Those federal agents are sharper than they look, already connecting dots between Sterling's hunting clients and the trafficking operation." Catherine joined them, legal pad in hand. "Sterling's looking at serious charges if Lily's testimony holds up. And speaking of testimony," she knelt to eye level with the girl. "Thank you for being so brave. Would it be okay if I recorded you telling me what you know about Mr. Sterling and your stepfather? It would help make sure they can't hurt anyone else." Lily looked uncertain, her gaze darting between Catherine and Goliath. "Goliath can stay right here with you," Sam assured her. "You're not alone anymore, Lily. Not ever again." The girl nodded slowly, then did something unexpected. She reached out and took Sam's hand, her small fingers cool against his weathered palm. "You were hurt," she said. "Inside, like Goliath was hurt outside." The simple observation, delivered with a child's directness, struck Sam to his core. "Yes," he acknowledged. "I was." "Are you better now?" Sam considered the question carefully. The medical answer was complicated. Damaged heart muscle, prescribed medications, recommended lifestyle changes. But Lily wasn't asking about his ejection fraction or his cholesterol levels. "Getting there," he said honestly. "One day at a time." Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. She turned to Catherine, straightening her shoulders with a determination that seemed beyond her years. "I'll tell you everything I remember. For Goliath. And for the other animals." As Catherine gently began the interview, recording Lily's quiet voice on her phone, Sam leaned against Goliath's warm bulk, suddenly exhausted. The bull remained perfectly still, offering silent support. Martha settled beside him on the hay bale. "Quite a day," she observed dryly. "Quite a week," Sam corrected. He gestured toward Lily, now speaking more confidently, as she explained how she had first encountered Goliath during the thunderstorm. "Did you know she could talk?" "Suspected," Martha admitted. "Children who don't speak usually can. They choose not to for reasons of their own. Often, trauma." Sam watched as Goliath shifted slightly, adjusting his position to maintain contact with both him and Lily. "And him? Did you know what he was capable of?" Martha's weathered face softened. "Samuel, every living creature is capable of more than we give them credit for. We humans just have an unfortunate habit of only seeing what we expect to see." "Even old rangers?" Sam asked, half joking. Martha's hand came to rest on his arm, her touch light but steady. "Especially old rangers who think their trails have all been walked. Sometimes the most important journeys start exactly when you think you've reached the end of the path." Outside, they could hear the continued activity, agents collecting statements, the reporter likely shaping tomorrow's headline, Tyler directing park staff. But in the barn, surrounded by the gentle sounds of animals and Lily's soft voice recounting her extraordinary story, Sam felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the empty quiet that had followed Elaine's death or the grim satisfaction of a job adequately performed, but genuine peace. His heart might be damaged, his career winding down, but somehow, against all odds, his life felt like it was just beginning. He closed his eyes, one hand on Goliath's warm flank, and allowed himself to rest, not in defeat, but in the certain knowledge that whatever came next, he wouldn't face it alone. 3 weeks after the confrontation in Martha's barn, Sam sat in the federal courthouse in El Paso, uncomfortable in the suit Catherine had insisted he wear for the hearing. His chest still ached occasionally, a physical reminder of how close he'd come to the end. The doctors called it a warning, a second chance that many never received. "Stop fidgeting," Catherine whispered beside him, immaculate in her charcoal gray suit. "You look fine." "Feel like I'm at my own funeral," Sam grumbled, but he stopped adjusting his tie. The courtroom was unusually crowded for a preliminary hearing. News of the hero bull of Guadalupe Mountains had spread far beyond Texas, capturing public imagination in a way that surprised everyone involved. The story had all the elements of an irresistible human interest piece: a mysteriously intelligent animal, a traumatized child finding her voice, a corrupt businessman, and a heart attack survivor discovering purpose beyond retirement. Martha sat on Sam's other side wearing what she called her church and courthouse clothes, a floral dress that had likely been fashionable sometime in the early 1990s. Edward occupied the seat beyond her, his arm still in a sling, but his color much improved. "Where's Lily?" Sam asked, scanning the room. "With her court-appointed advocate," Catherine replied. "They're keeping her away from the media circus. She'll only be brought in if the judge requires her testimony." The door behind the judge's bench opened, and the bailiff called for everyone to rise. Judge Harriet Mendoza entered, a formidable woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency. "Be seated," she instructed, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the documents before her. "This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of the property disposition of one Brahman bull, identification number SR775, commonly known as Goliath. We also have related matters concerning the ongoing criminal investigation against James Sterling, Jr. and Jason Mills." She looked up, surveying the crowded courtroom with a practiced eye. "Let me be clear from the outset. This is not a criminal trial, nor is it a media event. It is a hearing to determine the appropriate custody of an animal that has become central to several ongoing legal matters." Catherine had explained it all to Sam earlier. Today was just the first step in what would likely be a complex legal process. Sterling's lawyers would argue for the return of valuable property. The federal prosecutors would argue for Goliath's continued status as material evidence, and Catherine would present their most unorthodox argument, that Goliath deserved special consideration based on his actions and his critical bond with Lily. "First," Judge Mendoza continued, "I'd like to address the elephant, or should I say the bull, in the room. Where is this animal currently being kept?" The federal prosecutor, a sharp-looking woman named Angela Rivera, stood. "Your Honor, following veterinary recommendation and under federal supervision, the bull remains at the Clementine property where he has been recovering from a gunshot wound. U.S. Fish and Wildlife agents monitor the location daily." "And his condition?" "Stable and improving, according to the attending veterinarian." Judge Mendoza made a note. "I see multiple motions before me. Mr. Hargrove, you're representing Sterling Ranch. Please present your position." Sterling's attorney rose, exuding confidence. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Sterling Ranch is the legal owner of the bull in question, with registration and breeding documentation dating back 5 generations. While we sympathize with the unusual circumstances, the animal represents a significant financial investment and is critical to our client's breeding program. We simply seek the return of legally owned property." The judge's expression remained neutral. "Miss Rivera, the government's position?" Angela stood again. "Your Honor, this animal is a key component in our investigation of wildlife trafficking and potential animal cruelty charges against both Mr. Mills and Mr. Sterling. His presence was instrumental in uncovering the operation, and his behavior constitutes unique evidence that we believe will be crucial at trial." "Objection," Hargrove interrupted. "The government is anthropomorphizing livestock. A bull cannot be a witness in any meaningful legal sense." Judge Mendoza raised an eyebrow. "Save your objections for trial, Mr. Hargrove. This is merely a hearing." She turned to Catherine. "Ms. Whitaker, I understand you wish to present a third perspective?" Catherine rose, her posture confident despite the unorthodox nature of her argument. "Yes, Your Honor. I represent the interests of Lily Bennett, as well as Chief Rangers Samuel Whitaker and Martha Clementine. We're petitioning for a special designation for Goliath under both the Animal Welfare Act and the Endangered Species Act due to his extraordinary role in not only rescuing Lily Bennett, but also leading to the discovery of an endangered species trafficking operation. That's quite a reach of those statutes, Counselor, the judge noted, though there was a hint of interest in her tone. Perhaps, Your Honor, but the law must occasionally be stretched to accommodate extraordinary circumstances. We have expert testimony from animal behaviorists who have reviewed the evidence and concluded that Goliath's actions demonstrate a level of cognition and purposeful behavior that merits special consideration. Sam listened with pride as his daughter presented their case. Catherine had worked tirelessly, calling in favors from colleagues at environmental law firms, consulting with animal behavior experts, even bringing in a specialist in trauma-bonded therapy who had observed Lily and Goliath together. When she concluded, Judge Mendoza sat back, considering all three arguments. "This is certainly one of the more unusual cases to come before this court," she acknowledged. "Before I make any rulings, I'd like to hear from someone who has first-hand knowledge of the events. Chief Whitaker, would you please take the stand? Sam hadn't expected to testify today." He glanced at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly, then made his way to the witness box with deliberate steps, determined not to show any weakness. After being sworn in, he faced the courtroom. Familiar faces and strangers, all waiting to hear his account of what had happened in the Guadalupe Mountains. "Chief Whitaker," Judge Mendoza began, "you've served as a park ranger for 4 decades. In all that time, have you ever encountered behavior from a wild or domestic animal comparable to what you witnessed from this bull?" Sam considered the question carefully. "No, Your Honor, I have not. I've seen animals show intelligence, even altruism within their species. But Goliath's actions demonstrated something beyond that, a purposefulness, a determination to communicate and protect that transcended normal animal behavior. Could this not simply be anthropomorphism on your part, attributing human motives to animal behavior?" "That's what I thought at first," Sam admitted. "But the evidence speaks for itself. Goliath didn't just happen to be with Lily. He actively sought help when she needed it. He led us directly to her hiding place. He positioned himself between her and danger repeatedly. These aren't random actions." Sterling's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, with respect, Chief Whitaker recently suffered a serious medical emergency that could affect his recollection of events." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Sam felt a flash of anger, but kept his expression neutral. "My heart attack doesn't affect my memory, Mr. Hargrove," Sam replied evenly. "And my account is corroborated by Ranger Rodriguez, Martha Clementine, and most importantly, by Lily Bennett herself." Judge Mendoza held up a hand to forestall further objections. "I've reviewed the written statements from all parties, including Ms. Bennett's transcribed testimony." She turned back to Sam. "In your professional opinion, Chief Whitaker, what would be the effect on the child if the bull were removed to Sterling Ranch?" The question cut to the heart of the matter. Sam took a deep breath. "Devastating, Your Honor. Lily didn't speak for years until the threat to Goliath forced her to break her silence. Their bond is unusual, I grant you, but it's real. That bull represents safety to her, the only constant protection she had during months of hiding. Separating them would be traumatic for both. And you base this assessment on your decades of experience as a park ranger?" "No, Your Honor," Sam said quietly. "I base it on being a father who once failed to understand the depths of a child's attachment. On being someone who's seen what true loyalty looks like. And yes, on 40 years of observing how the natural world sometimes defies our limited understanding of it." A hushed stillness fell over the courtroom. Even Hargrove seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Judge Mendoza studied Sam thoughtfully before dismissing him from the stand. As he returned to his seat, Martha squeezed his hand briefly, high praise from a woman so sparing with physical affection. "I'd like to call one more witness," the judge announced unexpectedly. "Is Dr. Caroline Reyes present?" A middle-aged woman in the back row stood. "Yes, Your Honor. As the veterinarian who has been treating this animal, I'd value your professional assessment." Dr. Reyes made her way to the stand, her manner confident but unpretentious. After being sworn in, she faced the judge with the forthright gaze of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news to animal owners. "Dr. Reyes, in your professional opinion, is this bull a danger to humans?" "No more than any bull his size, Your Honor," Dr. Reyes replied. "Possibly less so. I've treated Goliath for 3 weeks now, changing bandages, administering medications. While I maintain appropriate caution, he has shown no aggression toward me or my technicians. His behavior is remarkably consistent and responsive. And his medical condition? Is he fit to be transported? The gunshot wound is healing well, but I would not recommend transport for at least another 2 weeks. Moreover, she hesitated. Please continue, doctor. In my 23 years of veterinary practice, I've never recommended this, but I believe separating this animal from both the Bennett child and the Clementine property would cause significant psychological distress that could manifest in dangerous behavior. Bulls are not domestic pets, but they do form attachments and demonstrate environmental preferences. Goliath has clearly bonded with the child and adapted to his current surroundings. Judge Mendoza nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, doctor. You may step down. The judge reviewed her notes for several long moments while the courtroom remained silent. Finally, she looked up, removing her glasses in a gesture that somehow signaled the importance of what would follow. This court finds itself in uncharted territory, she began. Property law, animal welfare regulations, criminal evidence procedures, and the best interests of a traumatized child all intersect in this case. There is no clear precedent to follow. She turned her gaze to Sterling's attorney. Mr. Hargrove, while I acknowledge your client's legal ownership, I cannot ignore the larger context here. This animal has become central to a federal investigation in which your client is implicated. Nor can I dismiss the documented therapeutic relationship between the bull and a child who has suffered severe trauma, some of which may have occurred on your client's property. The attorney began to protest, but Judge Mendoza raised her hand. I'm not finished, Miss Rivera. While the government has a legitimate interest in preserving evidence, an animal is not merely evidence to be tagged and stored. She turned lastly to Catherine. Miss Whitaker, your argument pushes the boundaries of existing statutes, but it raises valid questions about how our legal system addresses the complex relationships between humans and animals. Judge Mendoza replaced her glasses, turning to her written order. My ruling is as follows. The bull, known as Goliath, will remain under federal protection at the Clementine property for a period of no less than 60 days, during which time he will continue to receive veterinary care and be available for both the ongoing criminal investigation and the therapeutic support of Lily Bennett. Sam felt the tension drain from his shoulders, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am appointing a special guardian ad litem to represent the interconnected interests of both the child and the animal in this unusual case. Ms. Catherine Whitaker, given your background in environmental law and your connection to the case, I am appointing you to this role, provided you have no objections. Catherine stood, momentarily speechless, before finding her voice. No objections, Your Honor. I'm honored to serve in this capacity. Good. You'll report directly to this court on a bi-weekly basis. At the conclusion of the 60-day period, we will reassess based on the progress of the criminal case and the condition of all parties involved. Judge Mendoza gathered her papers. This hearing is adjourned. As the courtroom erupted in murmurs and movement, Sam sat motionless, processing what had just happened. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was a reprieve. Time for healing, for building a stronger case, for exploring possibilities none of them had considered yet. Did that just happen? Martha whispered beside him, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Did we just win? Round 1, Catherine corrected, but she was smiling as she gathered her documents. But it's a good start. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Catherine handled them with practiced ease, delivering carefully worded comments about justice and the welfare of all involved parties. Sam hung back, uncomfortable with the attention and still easily fatigued. As they finally escaped to Catherine's rental car, Sam found himself thinking not of legal arguments or court procedures, but of Goliath waiting in Martha's barn and Lily, who would be anxiously expecting news of his fate. Two broken souls who had found in each other what humans had failed to provide them. "You're awfully quiet, Dad," Catherine observed as she drove them away from the courthouse. "Just thinking about second chances," Sam replied, watching the Guadalupe Mountains appear on the horizon, timeless and enduring. "And how they sometimes come from the most unexpected places." Catherine glanced at him, then back at the road. "You know, I've been thinking about my position in Seattle. It's just a job. Nothing holding me there now that David's gone." Sam turned to her, hardly daring to hope what she might be suggesting. "Oh? El Paso has some excellent environmental law firms, and with this case likely to drag on." She let the thought hang in the air between them, unfinished yet full of possibility. "You'd consider moving back?" Sam asked carefully. Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Mom always said you loved those mountains more than anything. I used to resent that. But these past weeks, watching you with Lily, with Martha, even with that bull, I'm starting to understand what she really meant." "What's that?" "That loving deeply is who you are, Dad. The mountains were just where you could express it safely." She reached across to squeeze his hand briefly. "Maybe it's time I stopped running from that part of myself, too." Sam felt his throat tighten with emotion. He'd once have been too proud to show. "I'd like that, Katie. Having you closer." They drove in companionable silence after that, each lost in private thoughts until Martha, dozing in the back seat, suddenly spoke. "You two done with your father-daughter moment? Because I could use some lunch before we head back to check on our four-legged friend." Sam and Catherine exchanged glances, then broke into simultaneous laughter, a sound so unfamiliar yet so natural that it seemed to surprise them both. "Yes, Martha," Sam managed once he'd recovered. "I think we're done for now." But as the mountains drew closer, Sam knew they weren't done at all. They were just beginning. All of them, humans and animals alike, finding their way toward something new, something unexpected, something that felt against all odds like home. Autumn painted the Guadalupe Mountains in subtle shifts of color, not the dramatic reds and golds of New England forests, but the softer transitions of desert vegetation preparing for winter. Ocotillo turned a muted purple. The scattered cottonwoods along dry creek beds offered splashes of yellow, and the quality of light changed from summer's harsh glare to a gentler, golden illumination that made the limestone cliffs glow at sunset. 6 months had passed since the heart attack that had nearly ended Sam Whitaker's life, and instead had transformed it entirely. His retirement had become official 3 months ago, marked by a ceremony he'd initially resisted but ultimately found moving. 4 decades of service recognized by colleagues, friends, and even the governor's office. His ranger hat now hung on a peg by Martha's front door, a reminder of the path that had led him here. Sam stood on the newly expanded back porch of Martha's home, now legally his home too, since he'd sold his house in town and become her official tenant. The arrangement benefited them both. Martha had company and help maintaining the property, while Sam had purpose and a place where his frequent visitors were always welcome. Today was special, the culmination of months of legal battles, fundraising efforts, and community organizing. Sam checked his watch, then gazed down the gravel driveway where Catherine's car would soon appear with Lily and her court-appointed guardian. "They'll be here," Martha said, emerging from the house with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Sam before settling into the hand-crafted rocking chair that Edward had made during his recovery. "Court proceedings never run on time. That's as reliable as sunrise." Sam accepted the coffee gratefully. The morning air carried autumn's first real chill. "Did Rivera call with an update on Sterling?" Martha nodded. "A trial's set for January. With Mill's testimony and those financial records Catherine's team uncovered, Angela says it's about as solid as cases come. Sterling's lawyers are already floating plea deal options. Good, Sam said simply, satisfaction warming him more than the coffee. The past 6 months had revealed the full scope of Sterling and Mill's operation, not just exotic animal trafficking, but money laundering, tax fraud, and environmental violations that stretch back nearly a decade. What had begun with one bull's desperate plea for help had unraveled a criminal enterprise worth millions. The sound of tires on gravel drew their attention. Catherine's sedan appeared, followed by a small convoy. Tyler's Park Service vehicle, Dr. Reyes's truck, and somewhat surprisingly, a van from KTSM, the El Paso news station. "I thought we agreed no media," Sam frowned. Martha shrugged innocently. "Must have been Tyler's doing." "You know how he's been about community relations lately." Sam gave her a skeptical look but didn't pursue it. Since the events of the summer, Tyler Johnson had undergone a remarkable transformation from rigid bureaucrat to passionate advocate. His social media campaign to Save Goliath had evolved into a broader initiative for wildlife protection and ethical treatment of rodeo animals throughout the Southwest. The vehicles parked and doors opened. Catherine emerged first, elegant as always in a casual blazer and jeans. Behind her came Maggie Ortiz, Lily's court-appointed guardian, and then, the sight still capable of tightening Sam's throat, Lily herself. The change in the child over 6 months was remarkable, though still quiet around strangers. She spoke freely with her inner circle now. Therapy had helped, but so had the stable environment and consistent care she received in her foster placement with the Ortiz family. Twice-weekly visits to Martha's property to see Goliath had been court-mandated as part of her recovery plan, with Catherine documenting the therapeutic benefits for the ongoing custody case. "Grandpa Sam!" Lily called out, abandoning her usual reserve to race up the porch steps and throw her arms around his waist. The title had emerged spontaneously a few months back, and though he gently explained he wasn't actually her grandfather, the name had stuck. Sam returned the hug, still marveling at how this child had carved out a place in his heart so quickly. "Hey, kiddo. Big day today, huh?" Lily nodded, her expression serious. "Is Goliath ready? Does he know what's happening?" "Why don't you go see for yourself?" Martha suggested. "He's been watching that gate all morning." Lily needed no further encouragement. She darted back down the steps and around the side of the house toward the newly constructed enclosure that had replaced Martha's old barn, a facility designed specifically for its unique resident. Catherine climbed the porch steps more sedately, accepting a hug from her father. "Sorry we're late. Judge Mendoza had some last-minute paperwork she wanted completed in person." "Everything in order?" Sam asked. Catherine's smile provided the answer before her words confirmed it. "Signed, sealed, and officially the first of its kind in Texas legal history." Martha gave a satisfied nod. About time the law caught up with common sense. From behind the house came the unmistakable sound of Lily's laughter, followed by Goliath's distinctive rumbling bellow, a sound that had become as familiar around the property as the wind chimes or Martha's creaking rocking chair. The gathered group made their way around to the back field, where the morning's preparations were evident. A new sign stood at the entrance to 5 acres of fenced land, professionally designed and installed just yesterday. The KTSM cameraman was already filming as Tyler directed him to the best angle. "Goliath's Haven, Sanctuary for Healing Education," the sign announced in bold letters. Beneath it, in slightly smaller text, "A partnership between the National Park Service, the Bennett Foundation for Child Welfare, and the Clementine Whitaker Trust." The sanctuary itself had transformed Martha's modest homestead. The old barn had been expanded into a proper facility with veterinary equipment, educational displays, and comfortable seating for visitors. Connecting fenced pastures allowed for rotational grazing, and a small pond had been constructed to provide water even in drought conditions. A covered pavilion stood ready for the educational programs that would begin next month. And at the center of it all was Goliath himself, the Brahman bull whose actions had set everything in motion. Now fully recovered from his gunshot wound, his massive silver-white form gleamed in the morning sunlight as he gently accepted apple slices from Lily's outstretched hand. "Hard to believe that's the same animal who crashed through your barn wall," Tyler commented, joining them as they watched. "The video from our surveillance cameras has over 2 million views now, you know. People can't get enough of him." "Fame hasn't changed him much," Sam observed dryly. Dr. Reyes approached, clipboard in hand. "His latest blood work came back perfect. That new dietary regimen is working well." She smiled at the sight of Lily leading the massive bull around the enclosure with nothing but a light touch on his shoulder. "Still the most remarkable animal I've ever treated." The KTSM reporter, a young woman named Sofia Mendez, waited respectfully until everyone had gathered before approaching Catherine. "Ms. Whitaker, would it be possible to get a brief statement about today's significance? This is a groundbreaking legal precedent." Catherine glanced at Sam, who nodded his approval. The publicity had ultimately worked in their favor, creating public pressure that helped overcome legal hurdles. "Today, the state of Texas has recognized what we've known all along," Catherine began, her voice carrying the measured confidence that had won over Judge Mendoza months earlier. "Goliath is more than property. While not granted personhood in the legal sense, he has been designated as a sentient being of special status with rights to appropriate care, protection from exploitation, and consideration of his established bonds." "And what about his connection to Lily?" the reporter asked, gesturing toward the girl who was now sitting in the grass beside the reclining bull, apparently reading aloud from a book. "The court has officially recognized their therapeutic bond. Goliath has been designated as a therapeutic support animal with specific legal protections. This designation, combined with his status as key evidence in the Sterling case, provides the foundation for this sanctuary." Sam listened with pride as his daughter outlined the complex legal framework they had constructed, a patchwork of existing animal welfare laws, therapeutic animal designations, and newly interpreted statutes that together created something unprecedented. It wasn't perfect, and it had required substantial funding from anonymous donors, though Sam suspected Catherine had contributed significantly from her own savings. But it worked. As the formal interviews concluded and the gathering shifted toward celebration, Sam found himself standing beside Martha at the fence line, watching as Edward gave Tyler a tour of the irrigation system they'd installed. "You never did tell me how you knew," Sam said, a question that had lingered for months. "That day when Goliath showed up at the station, you recognized him immediately. You knew there was more to the story." Martha smiled enigmatically. "Some things you just know, Samuel, like how a storm's coming before the clouds show, like how a child's hurting even when they don't cry. And like how a bull could understand what a child needed when adults failed her," Sam pressed. Martha watched as Lily guided several visitors to meet Goliath, explaining with newfound confidence how to approach him respectfully. "The world's full of connections we don't understand. Doesn't make them any less real." Sam couldn't argue with that logic. He'd seen too much evidence of it firsthand. Catherine joined them, slipping her arm through her father's. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "Just admiring what you've accomplished," Sam replied. "I'm not sure I've told you how proud I am." Catherine leaned her head briefly against his shoulder, a gesture reminiscent of her childhood. "It wasn't just me. This has been the definition of a group effort." She paused, then added more tentatively, "I signed the lease on that house in town yesterday, the one near the elementary school. You're staying then? For good?" The El Paso firm made their offer official this morning. Environmental law with a focus on wildlife protection. Her smile turned wry. Apparently, high-profile cases involving heroic bulls make for good publicity. Sam felt a swell of emotion that his old self would have suppressed. His new self, the post-heart attack, post-Goliath Sam, let it show. Your mother would have loved seeing you like this. Passionate, purposeful. She would have loved seeing you like this too, Dad, actually living instead of just existing. Their conversation was interrupted by Lily, who came running over with excitement. It's time for the ceremony. Dr. Reyes says everyone should come to the pavilion now. The gathered crowd, Park Service employees, veterinary staff, legal team members, and supporters from the community, assembled under the newly constructed pavilion. At its center stood a simple bronze plaque mounted on a limestone boulder. Dr. Reyes stood beside it, with Lily and Goliath positioned prominently nearby. When we began Goliath's treatment 6 months ago, Dr. Reyes began, I told my colleagues we were simply saving an animal that had shown remarkable behavior. What I didn't understand then was that we were actually becoming part of something much larger, a story about connection, about listening when someone can't speak, about recognizing intelligence and emotion in unexpected places. She gestured to the plaque. This sanctuary isn't just about one bull, extraordinary though he is. It's about recognizing that healing happens in relationship between humans and animals, between the wounded and those who care for them, between the past we've survived and the future we create together. Lily stepped forward, holding a small cloth that she ceremoniously removed from the plaque, revealing the inscription beneath. Goliath's Haven, where the voiceless find speech, where the lost find direction, where healing begins. Below this were the names of all involved, with a special dedication, in honor of Elaine Whitaker, who taught us to listen with more than our ears. Sam felt his breath catch. He hadn't known about this part. Catherine squeezed his arm gently as Lily continued the ceremony, her voice clear and confident as she read from prepared notes. Goliath saved me when no one else could find me. He showed me that being different doesn't mean being alone. This place is for anyone who needs to be found, or who needs to find themselves. There wasn't a dry eye under the pavilion as Lily finished speaking and turned to wrap her arms around Goliath's massive neck. The bull lowered his head gently, allowing the embrace with the patience that had become his hallmark. As the formal ceremony concluded and people mingled, sharing refreshments and stories, Sam found himself drawn to the edge of the property where a small bench had been placed overlooking the distant mountains. He sat heavily, his energy still limited by his recovering heart. Catherine found him there a while later. Sneaking away from your own party? She teased, sitting beside him. Just catching my breath, Sam replied. And thinking. Dangerous hobby. He smiled at that. I keep thinking about that first day. How close I came to ignoring what was right in front of me because it didn't fit what I expected. But you didn't ignore it, Catherine pointed out. That's what matters. No, I listened. Finally. Sam gazed toward the mountains he'd spent his life protecting. Your mother used to say I was better at listening to the wilderness than to people. Catherine followed his gaze. She also used to say that sometimes the wilderness speaks through people, if we're paying attention. They sat in companionable silence, watching as the afternoon light turned the limestone cliffs to gold. From the pavilion came the sounds of conversation and laughter, punctuated occasionally by Goliath's distinctive rumble. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Catherine asked suddenly, the question carrying weight beyond the immediate moment. Sam thought about his damaged heart, now carefully monitored and gradually strengthening. About Martha, whose wisdom and stubbornness had saved them all in different ways. about Lily, finding her voice and her courage. About Goliath, whose inexplicable actions had created ripples that continued to spread outward in ways none of them could have predicted. "Yeah," he said finally, with the certainty of a man who had walked through fire and found himself remade. "We're going to be okay." As if summoned by their conversation, Lily appeared at the edge of the gathering, Goliath following behind her like an oversized shadow. She spotted them and waved, then began making her way toward their bench, the massive bull keeping perfect pace with her small steps. "Room for 2 more?" she called. Catherine laughed. "I think we can squeeze you in. Not sure about your friend, though." But as Lily reached them, Goliath did something unexpected. Instead of crowding the small seating area, he carefully lowered his massive bulk to the ground beside the bench, positioning himself so that each of them could touch him if they wished. Lily immediately sat cross-legged against his side, completely at ease with 2,000 pounds of bull as her backrest. "He says he likes watching the mountains, too," Lily announced matter-of-factly. 6 months ago, Sam might have gently corrected such a statement, explaining that bulls don't say things or have preferences for scenic views. Now he simply nodded. "Good taste," he commented, reaching out to rest his hand on Goliath's broad forehead. The bull's dark eye regarded him with what Sam had come to recognize as contentment. The massive animal released a deep breath, his sides expanding and contracting beneath Lily's small form. "Dr. Reyes says he's the healthiest she's ever seen him," Lily continued, stroking Goliath's silver-white coat. "She says he'll probably live a really long time now that he doesn't have to do rodeo anymore." "That's good news," Catherine said warmly. "The sanctuary needs its namesake." Lily looked up at Sam with sudden seriousness. "Is your heart getting better too? Like Goliath's shoulder?" The direct question, delivered with a child's unfiltered concern, touched Sam deeply. "Yes, it is. Different kind of injury, but same idea, getting stronger every day." Satisfied with this answer, Lily returned her attention to the distant mountains, now taking on the purple hue of approaching evening. "Martha says that when living things heal together, they heal better." Sam exchanged a glance with Catherine, both recognizing Martha's distinctive wisdom in the child's words. "Martha tends to be right about such things," he acknowledged. From the direction of the pavilion they heard Martha's voice calling Lily's name. Time for the cake cutting that had been promised as part of the celebration. "Coming!" Lily called back, scrambling to her feet. She looked at Goliath expectantly, but the bull made no move to rise, instead remaining settled comfortably beside Sam's bench. "You can stay with Grandpa Sam," she told the bull seriously. "I'll bring you back some carrots." As she skipped away, Catherine chuckled. "She negotiates with him like he's a person. And he responds like one," Sam pointed out. "Hard to argue with results." They fell silent again, content in the moment. The setting sun bathed everything in amber light, the mountains, the new sanctuary buildings, and Goliath's silver coat, now gleaming like burnished metal. "You know," Catherine said eventually, "most men your age are taking up golf or fishing after retirement, not starting animal sanctuaries with escaped bulls and forming unconventional families." Sam smiled. "Never did care much for golf." A gentle rumble emanated from Goliath, almost like laughter. Sam patted the bull's broad shoulder, feeling the powerful muscles beneath the hide, the steady rhythm of the animal's breathing, the undeniable presence of a being who had, against all odds, changed the course of so many lives. "Besides," Sam added, "some trails find you when you least expect them." As darkness settled over the mountains and stars began appearing in the vast Texas sky, Sam thought about paths and possibilities, about hearts broken and mended, about voices lost and found. His hand rested on Goliath's warm flank, His daughter sat beside him, and in the distance, Lily's laughter carried on the evening breeze. It wasn't the ending Sam had envisioned for his 40 years of ranging. It was something far better. Not an ending at all, but a beginning, rich with promise and unexpected joy. And as Goliath shifted slightly, adjusting his position to better accommodate his human companions, Sam felt a certainty settle in his healing heart. Some bonds, once formed, transcend all conventional understanding. They simply exist, powerful and true, asking only that we have the courage to recognize them when they appear. The mountains had taught him that, to recognize the essential nature of things beneath their outward appearance. And now, in his so-called retirement, a silent child and an extraordinary bull had taught him to apply that wisdom not just to wilderness, but to the uncharted territories of the heart. Martha's voice carried from the pavilion, calling them to join the others. Catherine stood, extending her hand to help her father up. Goliath rose too, his movements deliberate and gentle despite his imposing size. Together, the retired ranger, his daughter, and the bull who had brought them all together, they walked toward the lights and laughter of the gathering, each step a testament to the unexpected journey that had led them here, and to the promise of the path that still lay ahead. In our golden years, we often believe our greatest adventures are behind us, that retirement means an ending rather than a beginning. Sam Whitaker's journey reminds us that life's most meaningful chapters can start when we least expect them. Like Sam, many of us face health scares, estranged relationships, and the question of our continued purpose. But his story shows that healing is possible at any age, whether it's a damaged heart, a broken family bond, or a wounded spirit. The unexpected connections he formed with Catherine, Lily, Martha, and yes, even Goliath, remind us that family isn't always blood, and purpose doesn't end with retirement. Sometimes the most profound relationships emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, teaching us that our capacity to love, protect, and begin anew never diminishes with age. Have you experienced an unexpected connection that changed your life's direction? Or like Sam, have you discovered a new purpose when you thought your meaningful work was ending? Share your story in the comments below. Your journey might be exactly what another soul needs to hear today.